Hello everyone, in this video I will be working on my 2001 Dodge Ram 1500 with the 360 Magnum engine, and I'm going to be taking off the intake manifold and replacing the gasket and the plenum gasket and the manifold gasket. Unfortunately, I've already done this repair once within the last year and it appears to have failed again. I noticed the other day that the engine was making sort of a squealing or like a high-pitched whistling sound, and I started digging around trying to figure out where it was coming from, and I ended up taking off the air cleaner housing up here and could distinctly hear it sucking in through the throttle body. And then I noticed that if I removed the PCV hose here or the breather hose on the other side, which attaches, I've got it disconnected now, but it attaches right there going to the passenger side valve cover. It's sucking in air like crazy, which it should not be doing. And at first I thought maybe it was a problem with the PCV valve. So someone suggested very smartly to just disconnect the breather hose and plug it off with some tape, as well as to disconnect the PCV hose on this side and plug that off with some tape to basically isolate the crankcase from the manifold completely. And then I removed the oil fill cap and started the engine, and there was still a really large amount of vacuum coming through the oil fill hole. If I pulled the cap off, I could hear it sucking in, and I turned the cap upside down on the flat side and covered the hole, and it sucked it tight. So that tells me that somehow, even with the PCV system disconnected, I am still getting vacuum in the crankcase, and I think the only way that could be happening is through the seal between the intake manifold or the plenum and the engine. So it looks like I'll be having to remove the intake again. Unfortunately, I'm not really excited about it, but I didn't get to make a video last time I did this. So if you're having this problem, you will benefit from my misfortune by having a video to go by. There's plenty of other videos out there, some really good ones on YouTube, but I figured I may as well add my own, just in case there's some extra little tip that may help somebody. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think the first thing I'm going to do, just to be safe, is disconnect my battery, and I'm actually probably going to remove it completely because last time I did this I realized that the battery tray makes a nice little place to set hand tools while you're in here working. And just as a general overview, I'm going to be removing the fan shroud, possibly the radiator. I removed it last time, and it made it nice because I could stand in the engine bay and not have to worry about crushing the radiator with my backside. Of course, we'll be removing the upper radiator hose and eventually the outlet tube where it comes off the block. Of course, we'll take off the air filter housing and intake hose. You can see mine's sort of wrapped in duct insulation, sort of a redneck fix. Actually, it turns out the reason I did that was because I have a little scan tool that monitors sensor readings, and I noticed that the intake air temperature has been between 150 and 180 degrees consistently, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. I thought maybe I was getting a lot of excess heat from the engine compartment and it was just heating up the air intake. But now it all makes sense. I'm sucking air directly out of the crankcase, so that makes a lot more sense why the intake air is so warm. So really my little insulation here is really unnecessary. But anyway, I'll get all that out of the way, then I'll end up moving. I'll have to take the serpentine belt off, and there's a bracket, if I remember correctly, there's a bracket that the alternator and the AC mount to, and I think last time I just unbolted that bracket from the manifold and then the engine and swung these things out of the side and just tied them up over here somewhere. And then I'll have to pull the fuel rails on either side, and of course any vacuum connections to the intake as well as the fuel injectors. I'll disconnect those from the fuel rails before I pull the rails off. So anyway, that's a general overview. I'll show you a step-by-step process, but I'm going to go ahead and first remove the battery, and once I get that out of the truck, we'll move on. Alright, I've got the battery removed now. So the next thing I'm going to do is to drain the coolant from the radiator, and to do that we just need to remove the petcock on the bottom of the radiator on the driver's side. Let me see if I can point to it. Let's see, right there where the end of my pry bar is. We just need to back that out. That'll drain the coolant, and you can see I've got a couple funnels rigged up under there going in. Just had a piece of heater hose and it's piped into an old coolant bottle. So I'm going to drain that out. Once the coolant's drained, I can remove this upper radiator hose. Then I can disconnect the connections to the washer fluid reservoir and pull this off. It just slides into the fan shroud, and then we can work on getting the fan shroud out, or at least disconnected. So let me drain the coolant and then I'll show you how to get the reservoir off. Okay, so you can see I've got the petcock removed and the coolant is trickling out. It will help it to drain if you crack open the radiator cap on this side to release the vacuum effect. So I'm just going to let it trickle, finish draining, and then I will, like I said, I'll move on to removing the washer fluid reservoir. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Alright, while the coolant is finishing up draining out, I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose. It's just got a spring clamp here. I'll use some channel locks to get that off, and you'll probably get a little bit of residual coolant coming out of that. It's got kind of a low spot right here, at least on my truck, so there's probably a little bit of coolant trapped there. Just have a bucket or something ready to dump that in, and then I'll just probably pull that back here and tuck it somewhere out of the way for the time being until we can get to the other end of it at the water outlet. So let me get this removed, and then I can finally get to pulling off this washer fluid reservoir. Alright, I kind of jumped ahead because the coolant was still dripping out of the radiator, so I'll get to the washer fluid reservoir in a minute, but I figured I'd go ahead and pull the coolant reservoir off. So all you've got is a hose connection here. It comes off the top of the radiator, and I've already loosened this, but essentially it just slides up, and you can see there's some slotted keyways in the fan shroud that correspond to these little clips on the back of the reservoir. So again, you just need to disconnect that hose, pull up, and it'll remove, and you can set that off to the side. Of course, we'll also end up having to, if I remove the radiator, I'll have to pull the transmission lines going to the transcooler. But I think that's going to be worth the effort, because like I said last time, it gave me a lot of room to stand in the engine bay. Once you get the fan shroud out, you can actually put your feet on the ground and stand right there between the front of the engine and the front of the truck, and that way you can get to everything you need to get to. So sounds like the coolant's about done. I'm going to clean up under the truck, lay down under there, and we'll disconnect the connections here on this reservoir. Okay, I'm under the vehicle now on the driver's side, right up under the front bumper, and we're looking at the underside of the washer fluid reservoir. And before we remove it, we need to disconnect 3 connections. 2 of them are electrical. There's one here. This should just pull straight off. There we go. And then I don't know if you can see this, but there's another one, which I believe is for the motor. The fluid pump motor, and I think that's got a clip on top that you pull out. I should be able to push this down. There we go. And then the third connection, of course, is the hose. And I've got a piece of vacuum hose. It's about the same diameter. I'm just going to pull this off really quick, shove the vacuum hose on, and drain it into a bottle. Thankfully, there's not a lot of fluid in here, but it will run everywhere. So this hose will just pull off and we can drain it down. Once I drain it, I'll come back and show you how to remove the reservoir from the fan shroud. So let me get the fluid out and I'll be right back. Alright, I've got the washer fluid reservoir removed, and it's a little tricky if you don't know what you're looking for. This is the back side of the reservoir that fits tight up against the fan shroud. And you can see these two tabs here. This is proud, 1/4 inch or so. And they fit into these corresponding holes in the fan shroud, here and here. So if you just try to yank on this thing straight up, it's not going to come out. You have to sort of put a hand in from either side and push back that way against the fan shroud while you're pulling forward on the reservoir, and also lift up at the same time to get those tabs clear of these holes so the whole thing will slide up. So it takes two hands. I couldn't really film it while I was removing it, but I figured I'd show you the steps so that you know what you're looking for. So if you know that, then it's easy to take out. And when you put it back in, there's this clip on the bottom that slides into this slot right here on this bracket. But I'll show you that when we're done and putting everything back together. Alright, so now I'm ready to disconnect the shroud and try to get that out. I think what I may do, so that I don't have to remove the radiator, is I think if I take the bolts loose on the fan blades, I can push the blades back this way and the shroud should clear. So I may try that next. I'll figure out what size socket I need for these bolts. I think there's 4 of them, and pull these out and see if that'll work. Alright, as I mentioned in the last clip, my plan is to remove the 4 bolts that hold the fan blades on so that I can push the blades forward and get the fan shroud to clear them. As you can see, there's 4 bolts there. Just need to back those out, and it looks like it's a 1/2 inch socket. So let me remove those. Again, for reference, here's the front of the vehicle. That's the fan shroud. There's the fan blades. So let me pull those off, and then I'll work on getting the fan shroud loose and pull it out of the vehicle. Alright, I successfully got those bolts removed, and you see the fan blades are now loose, and you can just sort of push them out of the way back towards the engine. And now we can disconnect the fan shroud, and there are 4 bolts holding that on. Looks like 10mm, one here, one there, and on the other side 2 more just like it. Now when I did this repair last time, one of these bolts wouldn't rethread. It was this one, so I just held it on with a zip tie. It's worked fine, it's not going anywhere. But anyway, you will have 4 bolts. So one bottom, one on the top, and the same on the other side like I showed you. So I just need to remove those, and then the fan shroud will be loose, and hopefully we can just pull it up and out of the engine compartment. So let me get those bolts out and see if I have any luck getting this thing out. Alright, I've got the fan shroud loose now, and I just need to finagle it out of the engine bay. But you can see by moving the blades forward, it will give us the clearance. I'll just have to sort of tilt it and get it to clear the radiator, hopefully. That's the plan anyway. I'll need 2 hands to do it, but essentially that's the idea. And hopefully I'll be back in a second and we'll have had some luck. So let me wrangle with this thing for a second, and I'll be right back.